Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of Doctor Who Season 20, Story 4, Terminus. Now, if you discount the 5 Doctors, we're technically halfway through Season 20. At the moment, midway through, of course, with Resurrection of the Dalek, if Resurrection of the Daleks, or The Return, as it was originally going to be called, was in the season, then this would have been the middle story. And to be honest, I actually think the next story, Enlightenment, would have actually been a really good season finale. It would have, especially as it ties up this trilogy. I'll talk more about that in the review afterwards, in the next review. But I honestly think that would have been a very good season finale and would have tied up the season well. But of course, we've got the King's Demons. But then again, if Resurrection of the Daleks had been made for season 20, that would have been a great season finale. So, yeah, fucking strikes. Yeah, I'm going to be cursing and swearing at this particular strike until we get past Resurrection of the Daleks. Or after season 21 at the latest. But anyway, Terminus. And yeah, this story is written by Steve Gallagher, who wrote the worst Tom Baker story, in my opinion. Warrior's Gate. Yeah, what a great third to last story that was. God, I'm glad his penultimate and final stories were better. I mean, Keeper Track is not for everyone, but thankfully for me, that was the first good penultimate story of his era, and 5 will also get a very good one as well, I can say. Oh boy, and penultimate stories are usually a bit better than the final stories for the new series Doctors, apart from 9, of course, because Battle for Fast and the Waste is fucking awesome! Anyway, but Terminus, how does Terminus turn out? Well, it's far better than Warrior's Gate. It is superior in almost every way. I mean, it's not a 10 out of 10. It's not even 9, it's not even 8. We might go with 7. I'll confirm it at the end with the official score. But it's far superior to the 1 out of 10 Warrior's Gate. Far superior. In fact, anything above 3 out of 10 would have been far superior. Oh, fuck's sake. That story sucks so badly. This one, on the other hand, is actually quite creative, like Mordred Undead and Enlightenment. You know, all 3 installments of this trilogy are actually quite good. I do consider this the weakest, but then again, Mordred Undead was had a good, interesting concept, and Enlightenment was a pretty good story. This one is is interesting as it deals with a space leper disease in the form of the Lazarus disease. Does it say? Possibly. The Lazarus disease, which is basically space leprosy. And Nyssa accidentally gets infected by it when on board the spaceship, and it becomes a race against time to help, well, sort of a race against time, not really, but it does build up the tension for her. I do have to say, one problem I do have with this story is that Tegan and Nyssa hardly get Turlough get hardly anything to do, apart from at the start where Turlough accidentally causes the problem of the TARDIS sort of having this link to Terminus in the first place. But besides that, and some communications with the Black Guardian, he's not really needed. And Tegan, same, apart from causing a few problems in the middle, or during part 3, part 4, where they accidentally caused some problems in the ship that the Doctor and this other new character have to sort out. And another new character and another new character has to help Nyssa, and he knows a lot about Terminus, and it's actually quite good. We get a bit of backstory about him. I mean, it's not a huge amount, but it's good enough. The story does slow down after the first episode, but it's still got a good edge. In fact, the first 15 minutes, actually, 15 and a half minutes, actually is the Doctor and companions in the TARDIS, and then onto the spaceship. And I find this a pretty great first quarter of an hour. A bit like with with like Time Flight, that was the first quarter of an hour, first up to 20 minutes. That was good, and then once they went back in time in that story, that's when things went downhill. This one doesn't quite go downhill, so Steve Gallagher is more than redeemed himself from Warrior's Gate here. But it does have a few... It's not quite as good after the first 15.5 minutes. Well, okay, the first episode is still really good. It goes a little bit downhill afterwards, but not as bad as Time Flight. It's still a good story. So, like I said, way better than Warrior's Gate. The two new characters are quite interesting, although I don't know why we can have Turlough and Tegan have a bit more to do in this story. Maybe Turlough, because he's separated from the Doctor, he's got to focus his attention on saving Nyssa, so that he can then reunite with the Doctor and he can then kill him as part of his continued contract with the Black Guardian. I have to say the Black Guardian is delicious in all three stories, especially this one. He is, and the next one, of course. He is delicious. And there's another villain in the next story that I also find delicious, and I'll talk about her next time. If you're wondering which character, she appears in the final 2 episodes of the next story as basically the pirate captain, captain-esque of a pirate ship in a way. So anyone who's seen Enlightenment will know who I'm talking about. Another clue is that she is she has appeared before and will appear again after in the show, previously as a voice, but definitely be on screen again. That's for next time. That's Enlightenment. Terminus. I think there is a guy who was in some previous stories, I think, and will be again possibly. I think actually the guy who played Bruce in either Deadly Assassin or I don't know, that was the last story, Deadly Assassin or Invasion of Time. He was back. Actually, that was the last story in Mordred Undead. Okay, scratch that. There's also this there's these guard people, and some of them are okay, not quite the likable, but there's some good stuff with them. Last episode, they actually come quite interesting, quite fun. Although why one of them wants to kill the Doctor just at the end of part 2, start of part 3, I think it was, or was it the end of part 3, start of part 4? One or the other. I don't know why he wanted to kill the Doctor in that bit. Maybe because he was finding out too much. I don't know. But I mean, they're not awful. They're prickish, but they're not terrible. I mean, they're not like those people from Warrior's Gate who are less villains. Or at least I think they were. Or actually, I don't know. Were they villains? I think they were. But you know, I find these guys actually a bit more. Actually, you know what? I find these guys more likable than those guys, to be honest. Yeah, they were one of the main problems of Warrior's Gate. Actually, yeah, these are alright. I mean, they're not brilliant things, but they're serviceable. Yeah, that's the word, serviceable. They'll do. They're not great, but they'll do. And we've also got this thing who kind of doesn't really have that much relevance until later on. I mean, he turns out to be the guy who's curing everyone. He's actually able to cure people with radiation, but it's not sustained. That's why it doesn't 100% work, and that's why Nyssa leaves, so that she can make sure with her help they can actually make it work properly. And actually her departure scene is pretty good. I mean, it is a quick scene, and there isn't a huge amount of build up to it, but it does make sense when come to think about it. I mean, we've had worse companion exit scenes that come out of nowhere. This one actually, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It does actually have a little of sense. Does have some sort of tie-in with what's going on in the story. It's not just like with Vicky, she falls in love and decides to stay with that guy. I mean, that is out of... I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's out of nowhere, but it's abrupt. Leela's was out of nowhere. I mean, it was hinted throughout that story, but throughout the Invasion of Time, but it was an abrupt ending, abrupt conclusion. Here, it actually kind of makes a bit of sense. Even though I think it could have been expanded a bit more, I think it could have been built up a bit more. Although having the story centered around Nyssa quite a bit when it's not on the Doctor, then that does work quite well. And I think this is Sarah Sutton's last great performance. Well, obviously it's her last on-screen performance, and this includes audios, of course. Actually, no, she does appear in Dimensions in Time. But yeah, I think Sarah Sutton, for her final story, gives a brilliant performance. Yes, she does scream again, though, which is a strange thing that I've been noticing since Time Flight. She screams at least once a story. This time it's in episode 4, I think. So it's later in the day than some of the other ones, which are usually about, well, with Time Flight it was episode 1, and then the next ones it was about halfway through. Snake Dance, I think it was the 3rd episode, cliffhanger. Yeah, like Romana, it's something that's a bit out of character, but they do it every story. Well, in this case, since Time Flight on up to this story, or so since Earthshock. Every story since Earthshock, and with Romana, it was pretty much nearly every story she got kidnapped or needed rescuing or needed some help. Nearly every story, and that just didn't feel right with that character. I know these are classic hit series companions, and the writing wasn't as great for the majority of them. With getting quite a few of them to scream and yell quite a lot, and we're going to have at least 2, or certainly 1 of those still coming up. Mel, maybe Perry as well, but not as badly, obviously. But yeah, it just felt a little out of character for this. I mean, not so bad for Time Flight because of the things she saw, but after that, it's become a bit out of character, especially in Snake Dance. And also Arc Infinity, but besides Dan, well, yeah, those 2 were the especiallys. But, you know, putting that to the side to now, I'll also mention that Dimensions in Time, she does not scream, thank God. But yeah, I'll put that aside. But Sarah Sutton does a great final performance. And also, fun fact, she takes off her skirts during part 2. The character's supposed to be feeling ill, but apparently Sarah Sutton did this for fan service. So that was nice of her. As I think people were writing and saying that she wasn't taking off as many clothes. You know, how Doctor Who male fans are like. Yeah, like seeing our female companions with less clothes on. And this story certainly gives a few less clothes for Nyssa to wear. So she kind of took her skirt off for fan service. So I give her a round of applause for giving the fans what they wanted at the time. To Sarah Sutton, this is for you. I mean, that's not for what she does. It's for giving the fans what they wanted. Obviously, she didn't have to do it. And I didn't really pay that much attention. Though, a nice gesture, I suppose. Now, if it was paid, if more attention was in the story towards it, then I'd probably have an opinion on it. But anyway, move that aside, because that's not really mainly major part of the story. Like I said, Tika and Turlo don't really have a huge amount to do with the story, apart from fitting with some stuff from Terminus, and Turlo's causing the problem in the first place. But Janet Fielding and Mark Strickson work off well, and they prove to have some chemistry, which helps go forward with the following stories, as we're going to be having the 5 Tika and Turlo team up to Resurrection of the Daleks, with Chameleon in 2 stories. 1 story with this team, actually. So yeah, going forward, this team is looking promising. I would have liked a bit more with Nyssa as well. Again, I would have liked some more 5 Nyssa Tegan, and I would have liked a bit more 5 Nyssa Tegan Turlo. But for what we get a pretty good team. And I forgot to mention this at the end of my Enlightenment review. I really liked that final shot of Nyssa and Tegan looking at each other when Turlo joined. That was really good. And yeah, Terminus is a good story. I don't think it's particularly brilliant. It's not quite as good as Mordred Undead. I think it's better, little bit better than Snake Dance. I like the story a bit more. And unlike the Snake Dance, I didn't hate it before this recent rewatch. I didn't really remember it that well, besides the Nyssa leaving stuff. But rewatching it, yeah, it's quite interesting. It's a nice take on space leprosy. I suppose that's politics in this story. Would that count as politics? I don't know. Well, if it does count as politics, and all those fans screaming about too many politics in Doctor Who these days, and forget about all the politics that was in the classic series, then this is another case of, yes, there was politics in the classic series. Stop whining. I mean, maybe the problem is that maybe some people think there's more than there used too much compared to previous classic series. In which case, okay, you've got a point. But saying that there wasn't any beforehand, well then, you're wrong. That's a fact. So it's an opinion to say that there's more than there used to be, but it's a fact that there was beforehand. So you can't say there wasn't. The Daleks is the biggest example. Anyway, so Terminus, a good story, not amazing, but good. It's a pretty enjoyable, for most parts, interesting second installment of this trilogy. And for Steve Gallagher's second script, he masterfully improves over Warriors fucking Gate. This is Steve Gallagher's Spearhead from Space, majorly improved over his previous story, which was absolutely shite. Well, no, I'm allowed to say worse things on this channel. Shit! It was absolutely shit. Warriors Gate was shit. Really, really terrible shit. And I say this is the Spearhead from Space to his Space Pirates, because that is exactly what happened with Robert Holmes. He wrote the worst story of all time, the Space Pirates, and then he came back with one of the best stories of the Jon Pertwee era, Spearhead from Space, and still a really strong story in the entirety of the show, and a very strong fan favourite for the majority of the fans. So, yeah, so what Steve Gallagher has done is, like Robert Holmes, he's gone from his Spearhead from Space story to his... No, he hasn't. He's gone from his Space Pirate story to his Spearhead from Space. So, yeah, it took him a bit longer, because with Robert Holmes it was 2 stories, and about 6 or 7 months. But, actually, no, it'd be longer, because Walkins was 10 parts. Between 6 and 12, I would say 6 and 9 months then. Whilst here it was about 2 years. And maybe 2 months, maybe a month or 2. But certainly, compared to that, this, I wouldn't say it's a masterpiece, but it holds up really well for the most parts. Some slow bits, but forgivable, and nowhere near as tedious or annoying as Warriors Gate. If you like Warriors Gate, all the power to you. I'm glad you liked it, if you liked it. But for me, I would choose Terminus over that story every single day of my existence. So I'm going to give Terminus a 7 out of 10. Yeah, I know it's not high enough for me to say I would prefer watching this story every single day of my life compared to watching Warriors Gate every single day of the rest of my life. But Warriors Gate is shit. This is good. This is good. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's good. And I also prefer it to Snake Dance to you. This is already top half of the list so far. Without 5 Doctors, this would be top 3. But the 5 Doctors exist, so I think it's more around the middle, to be honest, which would be, including on 5 Doctors on that list, it'd be about 4th place. Okay, so that's Terminus. Thank you for watching my review. Next time, I'll be taking a look at what is my personal favourite story of this season, excluding the 5 Doctors, of course, and easily the best story of the Black Guardian trilogy, though the competition was still pretty good. Even if with lower scores, they were still good competition. Enlightenment. At the time of recording this review, I've rewatched the 4-part version. I'm going to rewatch the special edition before doing a review, so I can talk about both, and then I'll be on to King's Demons, hopefully watching that afterwards, and also the 5 Doctors original broadcast version after that, and I'll review that story after rewatching the special edition. And then we've got our Season 20 ranking, which will include the 5 Doctors. But spoiler alert, I think that's my favourite. That is definitely my favourite. And after that, it would probably be this. Enlightenment is probably the strongest story of the season. Discounting the 5 Doctors, which technically, for the season stories, you do have to do that. But I'm including it in my ranking. But out of the other stories, then I think Enlightenment is my favourite of the season. And then we're going to have the King's Demons, which is going to be lower down, way lower down, possibly lowest, possibly the weakest story, possibly. I'll confirm this in the ranking. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you for watching. Next time, Enlightenment, and I'll see you guys then. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. Holy. Blooper. Yeah, what a third to last final story that was. Yeah. Excuse me. So Sarah Sutton, this is for you. That didn't sound. So Sarah Sutton, this is for you. No, that. hang on. And yeah, once again, this is the Spearhead from space compared, and a very big fan favorite.